So before we start, I just want to remind you that we are the Lessard Project. We're in the Human Development Center, which is at LSU Health Sciences Center, and we are funded by the Louisiana State Department of Education. So this is the triad partnership that enables us to bring you these webinars. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about, its focus is activity to activity transitions. But at the end, we are going to talk about annual transitions. I have a couple of things. One is an annual transition planning form and a couple of templates for one-page profiles, or some people call them all about me. So we'll talk about that. But our main focus is going to be activity to activities transitions, what they are and why they tend to be difficult, especially for our students with ASD and related disabilities. I'm going to provide you some examples of tools that can be used for everyday transitions. And although some of the examples will relate to school, they can be easily modified for home use. And then I've got several video examples that show some priming activities and how to use those and how to structure transitions. And then I'll share the annual transition materials that I have with you. So we all experience a variety of transitions during each day and across our lives. So to start with, I'd like you to just take a minute and jot down in the chat box some transitions that you may have already made today. Those would be sometimes little transitions like place to place, but maybe some of you had a big transition. Maybe you bought a car or a house or had a change of status today. So just type some of those in. Yeah, so some of you, it was the transition that driving from home to work, from home to a parent conference and back home. You had a transition even before then because you had to get out of bed and get upright and get ready. So there's tons of transitions every day that we make. And typically the more transitions you have, the more taxing your day is and the more energy it takes. And that's why it's so important to structure these as best we can. Oh, finish proctoring an ACT task, transitioning from playtime to learning time. Yes. And moving other people from class to class. All of that is extremely, extremely taxing, depending on how chaotic it gets, right? So what are transitions and why are they so difficult? So a transition is any change, could be within an activity. So within an activity, it could be going from one step to another, right? But you're staying in the same place. It could be moving from one activity to another. So you have to stop something and start something else. It could involve moving to and from different environments, like changing grades, changing classrooms, going from lunch to recess to other classes, or it could involve unexpected events. So maybe there's a fire drill, or there's a lockdown, or maybe the para who's normally there is sick today, or the teacher is out. So it can be, any of these can be transitions, right? Changes. And then we can also have what I call big T transitions. And these are things like moving grades, or changing schools, or even moving from school to a work environment, or from school to a college or other higher ed environment. And we're not going to talk about those transitions from school to the community today, but we do have resources for that if you contact us. So why do they tend to be hard and take so much out of us? Stop and think what it takes. You have to stop something that you're involved in, even if you're not finished, right? Sometimes you have to shift your thinking to something else. You have to get organized around the new thing and decide what the steps are, what materials you need, and you may even have to physically move yourself from one place to another. And it can be taxing. And what makes it worse is you may have liked what you were doing, that you had to stop. It might have been a preferred activity, something that you're good at and something that's easy for you, and you've had to transition to something that is not preferred and something that is really difficult. So think about the days when you have to do this a lot, when you're interrupted quite a bit and it requires transition after transition. Those are the days that are most fatiguing because it's taken a lot of energy and cognitive flexibility to deal with all of those stops and starts. Think about how doubly hard that can be for our students with ASD and related disabilities. And that is because our guys with ASD and related disabilities have trouble shifting their attention. They don't tend to be cognitively very flexible, and they tend to find it difficult to switch once they're into a pattern of behavior. They tend to find it difficult when that is disrupted. They also, as we know, have a greater need for predictability and sameness. And sometimes there's some challenges for them in understanding what the activity is that's coming up next and what's involved in that activity to be successful or to have it completed. But we know when transitions are supported, that we can reduce the time it takes to transition, that when they're supported and they are structured, appropriate behavior increases, because we know transitions do tend to be a time when we see challenging behavior. When transitions are supported, there's going to be less reliance from the students on adult prompting, and it's therefore going to increase their independence. And we know that when transitions are supported, it aids in successful participation in school and community outings, because after all, transitions are just a part of life, right? So if we can organize transitions into steps and activities, we can reduce the stress because we've created a predictable routine and we've also structured and minimized waiting time. So I came across this and I thought it was interesting. This is something from the National Institute for Early Education Research. So this is about preschoolers. And it was done in March of 2017. And so if you look at the school day for preschoolers, other than instructional time, which is either group work or small group work, the majority of the time is spent in transition. I don't have statistics for students in the older grades, but I would tend to think that by the time they get to middle and high school, that's probably even greater, if not the same or even greater. So that's why it's so important for us to have efficient and effective transitions. We want them to be well planned and taught. We want to make sure we have clear expectations, that we communicate those to our students so they know exactly what's expected. We want to make sure that we do everything we can do to have those students ready to end an activity and start the next one. And a big part of our job with our guys with ASD and related disabilities is right there. How do we help them get prepared to do that stop and start that's required for a successful transition? We have to make sure that we as teachers are ready for the next activity because we don't want a lot of downtime or wait time. As a mentor of mine used to tell me all the time, our students with ASD don't do nothing well, meaning downtime or unstructured time or free time is usually not our friend. And so you don't want a lot of wait time when you're transitioning from one thing to another. So again, we want them orderly and systematized and choreographed so that it requires as little direction from the teacher as possible. We want to make sure that the students know exactly what to do, and again, no idle time. So let's look at what we need to do to plan a transition. How are you going to go about making sure that the transition is effective and efficient? So first of all, you want to look at your day and minimize the number of transitions, knowing that they are taxing on students and probably on you, and they do tend to disrupt. Making sure that you're efficient in terms of the number of transitions that you have during the course of your day. Then you want to determine what your transition routine will be because you want to standardize it and make it consistent and predictable. So how are you going to orchestrate that transition? Third, you want to determine what cues you're going to use. So when we talk about cues, those can be your verbal cues, your nonverbal cues like signals, as well as your visual cues, your visual supports that you're going to use. These need to be consistent and they need to be things that all of your students can understand. You need to then teach that transition routine to your students, and you want to make sure you practice it. And we're going to look at some short videos. I have several during the webinar, and one in particular shows a teacher on the first day of school priming her kids for the transition routine of getting in line and showing how they practiced it. You want to stagger transitions. I've watched in classrooms this done really, really well. You want to make sure that everybody's not getting up and moving at the same time sometimes because you don't want to have traffic jams and people running into each other. And so seeing how you can stagger transitions so that they're done in an orderly way and non-chaotically. And then finally, you want to determine what reinforcers you will use. Are you going to reinforce the class as a group? Will there be opportunities for reinforcers for individuals? Are you going to use tangible reinforcers, maybe like a token board? Are you going to use a point system? Are you going to use candy for younger kids? Or is it just going to be praise? What are you going to use for your reinforcement strategies for them? And the supports that you use to make your transitions effective and efficient, some are going to happen before the transition occurs, some are going to happen during the transition, and some are going to happen after the transition. So we're going to talk about each of these times and give you some examples. So things that you'll do before the transition can really be lumped under the umbrella of priming and for priming strategies. And for those of you who have heard any of the Lessardians speak on essential support strategies, you know that we really harp on priming quite a bit because it is your friend. And all that means is it's giving people a heads up about what's going to happen, what's expected, and so that you're exposing them to things ahead of time. We know our guys with ASD and related disabilities are not friends of surprises. They don't like things to come at them from nowhere that they're not ready for. So this ensures predictability. if you're going over things ahead of time. It tends to relieve stress, reduce stress in kids that then begin to trust an environment that is predictable and where they know exactly what to expect. So some examples of priming would be looking at the schedule at the beginning of the day, using a timer to let them know how long they have left of an activity before a transition occurs. Maybe even giving 5, 4, 3, 2 warnings. In 5 minutes, we're going to go to lunch. In 2 minutes, we're going to clean up. So those kinds of things so students can get prepared. It could be that you remind them of the rules for the transition or the steps. Or it could be letting them know in advance that something is changing. So one that I see a lot is when it's raining. And so there's not going to be going outside or whatever. So giving them a heads up at the beginning of the day, remember what we do when it rains, we have inside recess. And here's the things we're going to do. So when should you use priming? Absolutely all the time. Again, we're talking about a school environment a lot, but we're going to have one example where it's a parent using priming with a high school student, but this is an easy way to prepare your students or your children ahead of time for activities, and you should use it all the time and build it into your home and school routines. So here's some things that you can use in class or at home. You can use schedules. You can use visual schedules, again, that let them know the order, what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and that gives you an opportunity also to modify that schedule when things are going to be different. You can use pictures or PowerPoints to prime about field trips or to review a previous lesson. You can use token boards, which I have some examples of in a minute, and those just let a student know either how long or how many times they have to do something before they're finished. And then you can do lists, or some people call them task analyses of the steps of things that have to occur within an activity for it to be finished. So all of those are helping a student to look ahead of time at what's going to be expected. So here's just a couple of examples. This would be, the first one is whistle command, so that when the whistle cue is given, what do you have to do? When the whistle blows once, it means freeze. When wherever, and put any equipment on the floor. When it's twice, it's time to sit down. And then 3 whistles means that you quickly sit in your seat and get ready to transition. The big one at the top is just really a combination of kind of a social story and the steps of transition. And we're going to show you a social story in a minute. So it's really easy if you have the steps down to maybe turn it into a social story or a social narrative, whatever your student seems to respond to better. The top right one is just the steps after lunch in terms of that transition. And then the bottom one has to do with the expectations and rules when you come into the classroom. Again, a transition of entering the room. We talked a little bit about schedules and things like that. The top one is just a first in for those of you who have early learners or kids who don't yet sequence a lot of things. You can get them started to begin to use a schedule by just using a first then or a first then, so that it just begins to let them know, okay, right now we're working, and when we get done working, you can use the computer. You could use that in conjunction with a timer so they know how long work has to last before they get the computer. The one to the left has to do with something we talked about a while ago, how our guys, if there is downtime or wait time, it really helps them if you can somehow structure that for them. So this is an example of a choice board where the individual got to choose what they could do while they are waiting. And then the last one has to do with a trip to the dentist office and just letting them know what the steps are. And that would be a great priming activity because you don't want to take them to the dentist and have there be surprises. So we're going to look at a video. Our first video is showing somebody using the visual schedule the way it should be used, which is you're priming at the beginning of the day.
By using a visual schedule, we're able to give the children a sense of what the sequence of the day is going to be. But we also have a history to the day. So each time we look at the schedule, we say first we played, and then what did we do? And I call on everybody. And if something happens that we have to change our schedule for any reason at all, so for instance, if it starts to rain. And then, Sophie, are we going outside today?
No.
No. Usually we go outside right after group, but not today. Today's a rainy, snowy day. I like to give them a chance to participate in what's happening during their day. And everything is not written in stone. There's a lot of flexibility. When our music therapist comes, we put the picture up, and they come in and they look at the schedule and they say, Music Gina's coming today. So it gives everybody that chance to spread good news. We're going to have group, and then we're going to have Music Gina. And it's very, very helpful in helping those kids organize themselves, but it's also very helpful in eliminating the amount of reminding and talking that the staff have to do.
Okay, don't we all wish we were popular like Music Gene? The next video, I have another short one that shows older students being primed about how to get in line.
Lots of times when we go when we line up to get in line, what would be important for you to remember as you walk in line? Julia?
To make a silent, straight line.
Yeah, why is it important to be quiet as we walk in the halls to go downstairs? Julia?
Because some classes might be learning still, and we don't want to disturb them.
And it's not so true right this minute because everyone's going down for the whole school meeting, but lots of times when we go outside to play, other kids are going to be working. Julia?
If a person that you know walks by, don't say, hi, just...
So what might you do if you want to greet your friend and you're happy to see them, but you don't want to be real noisy? What do you think, Evan?
Just wave to them.
And I'll work on doing that too. I'll work on when I see my friends going like that. I know it's hard to do, isn't it?
Especially when it's...
Yeah, especially when it's people we really love, right? All right, Harrison, would you show us how to get in, go stand over there getting ready to get in line in a way that's quiet and in control? Okay. Abby, would you go get in back of Harrison? What do you notice about the way Harrison and Abby walked over there? Clemmy.
Walk quietly.
Claire?
They, when Annie got there, she didn't start talking.
Okay, so what if she didn't start talking, what did she do?
She just stood there quietly.
Okay, Claire, would you get in line, please? Cole, here, put on your name tag and get in line. I'm going to watch you walk from here to the end of our lockers, okay? And I want to see how safely and carefully you can walk from here until the end of our lockers.
The next one we're going to see is a mother who is using a priming strategy for her high schooler.
I think that I've used priming a lot with him, probably one of the most used strategies I've ever used. And we started when he was about 3, and it looked a lot different than it does now at 16. We used to draw a lot on the fly. I'd write on napkins and have him hold whatever he needed to get around. And as it's progressed, now that he's older, a lot of times he's even initiating, asking what's going to happen this week, what's going to happen at this event, and he'll come to me before I can even get to him to prime.
So I was just wondering, what exactly do we do?
Okay, well, let's see. Let's look at the clock. So it's 3:07. So the first thing you do is we go to the side of the building and you practice the music, and then we'll walk up the hill and you'll march for practice, and then we'll go get ready to walk on the field for competition. So there'll be 3 things. So first music, then marching, then field. And you go on the field at 4. So you've got almost 50 minutes before you left it. Okay?
Awesome.
Okay, so 3 things and then field.
All right, so I don't know if you could hear that last one. It's kind of faint, but I think the thing I got out of it was you could really, she said she had in the beginning that priming had been one of her go-to strategies that she had used throughout her son's life. And towards the end of the video, when she's recapping the instructions she gave him, you can see we talked earlier about first then boards and first then. And when she recaps, she says, okay, now 3 things. First this, then this, then this. You can see him shake his head and say, got it, thank you. And so those are strategies that we all use in everyday life, and it's just doubly important that we pay attention to using that for our guys with ASD and related disabilities. So another support strategy that we can use for priming would be social stories. And we can use, social stories are created by Carol Gray, and social stories have a very prescribed format to them that you can read about. You can also create a social narrative, which is just not prescriptive, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute, to let students know about expected behaviors, to prepare them for a change like a substitute teacher or a new baby, or fire drills, tornado drills, or just how-tos. Anything you need to explain to them you can do by using a social story or a social narrative. So this is one I created for waiting, because as we've talked about, waiting is really hard for our guys. So this one just says, you know, sometimes I have to wait for my friends to finish before I can move to an activity. To wait means that I have to stay in my desk, I have to stay quiet until it's time for the next activity. Waiting can be hard for me, and even a few minutes can feel like a long time. Waiting is boring, and it's hard for me to stay calm. Sometimes I talk out loud, and it makes it hard for my friends to do their work. I can keep myself busy while I wait. I can read, draw, color, or choose a fidget. Keeping myself busy will help the time go by a little faster, help my body stay calm, and help me stay quiet. If I'm feeling upset, I can tell my teacher and ask for a break. Waiting quietly is a very important skill. My teacher and friends are happy when I wait quietly and do not disturb the class. So even though it doesn't follow the prescription of Carol Gray's social stories, what it's designed to do is help the student gain some perspective, which it talks about what that behavior, how that behavior impacts friends and teachers, which might be something that they are not aware of until you wrote the story. Gives them a reason for doing what you are asking them to do, tells them exactly what the expectations are, and then again gives them perspective. It's going to make their friends and their teachers happy. Another support that we talk about quite a bit is video priming or video modeling. This works extremely well with kids with ASD and related disabilities. They tend to be visual learners anyway. Videos, by the nature of how they're produced, or happen the same way every time, so they're predictable. You can video going on a field trip, showing them where they're going, transitioning to a new school. You can go to the school and video that. And again, you can do how-to videos. So you can do a video of how to transition from the bus to the classroom, or how to get in line and go through the cafeteria line. So different things like that. So I'm going to show you a video model that was created to show an individual student how to use their visual schedule.
This is how I check my schedule. My Pixar schedule helps me know what I'm doing next at school. When my teacher tells me it's time to check my schedule, I walk to where my schedule is kept. This is what my schedule looks like. There are many pictures to show what to do and where to go. I have a spot that tells me what I am doing right now. I take the top picture from the line and put it on the now spot. When I am done with that activity, I put the picture in the all done box. Then I look at the top of the line again. Watch me to see how I do it. My teacher is telling me to check my schedule. I am walking to my schedule on the wall. I see that I have done with my table work, so I put the table work picture in the all done box. Now I look to see what is next. I pick the picture on the top of the line and put it on the now spot. It says it is time to go to the bathroom, so that is where I go. When I am done, I check my schedule again. Now it says circle time. I walk to the circle, just like my schedule said. My schedule helps me know what to do and what to expect.
Okay, I got some individuals who said they could not hear or see that. Could you guys hear or see that? Good, good. Okay, well maybe it was just somebody at one side. Oh, somebody no video or audio. Okay. So some yes and some no. So what you can do, what this was it showed a peer modeling for an individual student how to use the schedule. So you can use a peer to show that. If the student himself or herself can do parts of it, you can video them. Sorry. And it's a really effective way to teach them how to do stuff. I don't want to try to play it again because I'm not sure. I think it had something to do with some of the sites. So, but just know that video modeling is a great way to be able to prime them. You could show this video in the morning just to remind them the steps of using their schedule. Okay, so supports can also happen during a transition. So let's talk about some of those. Some of the things you're going to do during the transition to support the student. You're going to make sure that you secure their attention. So we talked earlier about establishing your cues ahead of time. So you begin the transition by using the predetermined cue. It may be a bell or a timer or a chime, or maybe it's a verbal cue like eyes on me, focus on me please, can I have your attention, whatever it is. And it may be a combination. So you may have a signal and then the verbal cue. Then you want to give directions. You want to remind them or review the procedure, what they're expected to do. And it's good when you start to give the directions by saying, in a moment we are, or in a minute we are, because what could happen if you go into the directions is they might jump up and start moving before you're done giving the instructions. So you want to remind them of the signal that you'll use to begin the transition, right? And this is more priming. You'll want to provide precise details, explain clearly what you want them to do. So when I say go, in a minute, when I say go, you're going to put your books away, push your chairs in, and walk quietly in groups to the carpet, starting with the blue group. You want to check for understanding. So following the directions, you may make sure everybody understands. And as part of your directions, you might also explain to them what they are going to do when they're finished with the activity, so that there's a plan for their wait time. You may want to assign transition buddies for some of your students that need additional help. And if so, then as part of your directions, you want to remind them who the buddies are. So then you're going to initiate the transition by giving the signal. And then you want to watch, as in that video we looked at a while ago where the teacher said, now I'm going to watch you walk in line. You may want to observe without interrupting during the transition and wait to give feedback when it's done. If it's not been done precisely or exactly like you want it to do, then it's okay to get them to do it over again, not in a punitive way, but just to give them constructive feedback and say, I think we can do that safer, or I think we can do it a little faster, let's do it another time. Some of the things you might be looking for are those students who need some extra supports, again in the way of a peer, or maybe they need additional visual cues. Some students might need a transition object or a picture that they take with them to go from point A to point B. Something that they put in a designated spot when they get to where they're going. You might observe to see if all the kids were ready to move. Were they ready to stop the activity? Or did some students engage in unexpected or challenging behaviors? All of this will help you to determine other supports that you might need. So once the cue to start the transition is given, you may decide to also use a countdown to help motivate the students to move quickly. So you might count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Or with younger students, you may use a transition song or a chant, and we're going to see that hopefully in a minute. Hopefully that one will work for everybody. And it's also going to be important that whatever they're transitioning to is already set up and ready to go, so that, again, there's no downtime and it's all set and they can become engaged immediately in the activity. So we've talked about how important it is for a student to be ready to move from one activity to another. And here are some ways you can help them. So timers. And timers, they have standalone timers. They have timers that you can put on the phone. You can use the timer on your smart board, whatever works best for your students. Just a way for them to be able to gauge how soon they are to having to change from that activity to the next one. I'm really fond of this one, the one at the bottom. It's the Children's Countdown Timer. It's free, and I suggest you look at it. It's a free app, and you can put pictures from your phone on it, so you could use that student's actual picture to motivate them to engage with the timer. You have a template for this one in your handouts, and the reason I like this one is because you can make it your own time. You're not going to be obligated to follow real time. So if you have a student that needs to work faster or slower than real time, then you can peel these off however you want to. And then at the bottom, you wouldn't have all of those pictures. You would have selected the one that was going to happen when they stop the activity. So they're either going to check their schedule, maybe they're transitioning to home, maybe if you're using this at home, they're transitioning to bed, or maybe they're transitioning to catch the bus. So it's just another way to help them see how close they are to being done. There are lots of other ways you can do this: token boards, punch cards. The one on the bottom left is just a picture off the internet that's cut up to make a puzzle. They earn a puzzle piece for each thing they complete, and when the picture is fully completed, they get their reward. The one on the bottom right just shows you the different steps to all the transitions that happen during the day, and how they can check them off and kind of self-monitor as they go through the steps. Lots of ways you can measure time concretely for them through visuals. One of the things that I've found really useful and important, again, we want to do everything we can to have our kids be ready to move from one thing to another. It's especially hard if you have a transition from a highly preferred thing to something that is not preferred. So as best you can, when you look at your transitions, pay attention to that, so that if you can and have it in your power to put something that's sort of a neutral activity in between highly preferred and non-preferred, then you're easing that transition for your student. The other thing is, if they are not done, it is going to be more difficult for them to move to what you want them to switch to. So I suggest having a finished later folder, and in your handouts I included this cover for a finished later folder, and also the icon that can go on their schedule. So I encourage you, as part of your priming, to remind them that if they aren't finished, the work goes in the finished folder, and then you show them on their schedule when the time will occur for them to do all the work they didn't finish. And that should help them be ready to move from one thing to another. Okay, now we're going to, hopefully everyone will be able to see and hear this one. We're going to look at a transition routine that incorporates a lot of the things that we just talked about in terms of structure during the transition.
We're getting those chairs pushed in. Face that leader and lines to the carpet.
Lines to the carpet. Lines to the carpet. Lines to the carpet.
You guys make that look easy. That's another team point for you. All right, friends, let's take a peek at
Stand up, stand up, stand up.
to your line.
Line,
And carpet.
carpet, carpet.
Nicely done. I'm going to give us some points. Great job coming to a people here, to the carpet. And 517.
Dragons all the way.
Wow, great role models. Wow, you're going to crisscrossed applesauce. We'll give you another point.
Yes.
Good job. Well, good morning, everyone. I know.
Turn to our desk. Ready? Stand up.
Stand up, stand up, stand up.
Oh, we were so close. We almost all stood up before the third time. I'm going to get the point on that one. All right, face your leader and lines back to desks.
Line back to desk. Line back to desk. Line back to desk.
Ooh, you guys did so good. You have earned a team point, which puts you way ahead of your teacher. Very nice job. But you know what?
Okay, what I really like about that is a couple of things, and I was going to get your feedback on it, but I'm kind of getting a little bit short of time. But you can see that her reinforcement system was teacher points versus team points. So when she has them repeat stand up, stand up, stand up, that's 3 seconds. Rather than her counting, they are chanting that, and the rule is they're supposed to all be standing by the third time they say it. When they didn't achieve that, you'll notice that she was still very positive. Oh, you almost made it, but that's a point for me. And so she has a game where the kids are in competition for points with her. And so I'm sure the system involves earning something. We don't know what that is, but you can see how well choreographed it was, so that the kids were moving in a way that it didn't create traffic jams, and it was just very, very efficient. And so I think that's a really, really good example. So the things you want to do after transition occurs, and we talked about them a little bit already, you want to troubleshoot, and you want to look to see, are certain individual students having trouble? If everybody's having trouble, then maybe you need to tweak your instructions or your directions, or maybe your choreography needs to change if there's traffic jams or kids running into each other. But you also want to look to see what individual supports do some of your kids with ASD and related disabilities need in order to efficiently transition. So that's when you want to troubleshoot and make sure you get those additional supports, or tweak your transition however you need to make it more effective and efficient for all your kids. And then you always want to reinforce them. Again, I really liked the point system she was using. I think verbal praise is great, and we always want to include verbal praise that's labeled, so that it's not just great job, but it's very specific. Everybody cleaned up so nicely, or everyone stood up before 3 seconds, or whatever it is that you're praising, make it specific. Decide what other reinforcers you might give them. Are they going to earn things as a team? Are you going to offer individual reinforcers? Are they going to be tangibles? And if so, what? We all work better for reinforcers. Okay, so another thing you can consider is self-monitoring, and this is a teachers pay teachers thing. But what I like is if you have the steps or the rules for a transition, you can always turn it into a self-monitoring or a monitoring or a checklist. And it's a great skill for kids to monitor their own behavior and how they did at something. So just give it some thought. So this one could be adapted to for an individual student. I walked single file. I looked straight ahead. I kept my hands to myself. I was quiet. I did not leave the line or wander off alone. So you can turn it into self-monitoring that kids can do or the group could do, which is always a nice skill to teach kids. All right, this is your part. We have just a minute left, so I'm going to skip one of your handouts that you have in your packet of handouts is a daily transition plan. And this is not fancy for sure, but it gives you a column where you could write your daily transitions, what all they are, like entering the classroom, going outside, going to lunch, maybe transitioning from one class to another. You could use it for an individual student and then decide what are those strategies that you're going to use before the transition occurs. What are some of the things you're going to do during that transition to make it structured and predictable? And then what are some of the strategies you're going to use after the transition that we talked about? So I've got, went wrong way. I've got a couple of scenarios that you can look at really quickly. One is a 4-year-old, like a preschooler, who, when it comes time to change activities, ends up running around the classroom, knocking materials off the shelves. Or a middle school student who earns computer time as a reward, but when it's time to move back off the computer, when reward time is over and it's time to get back to work, the student exhibits some aggressive behavior. So with a little bit of time we have left, if you would just type in the chat box, think about one of these scenarios and let me know an idea you would have to help that transition go better. It could be something you do before, during, or after. So just say preschooler and then type in what it would be, or middle schooler, and type in your idea. Okay, so Wanda's saying a picture schedule for the preschooler. That's a good idea. So they need to know the order of things when and what's coming next. A visual about lining up. That would be great as well. For the middle schooler, a reinforcement system transitioning preferred to non-preferred. Exactly. I thought the same thing. So for the middle schooler, priming before, right? To let them know that first they're gonna do the computer, or then they're gonna get back to work, or letting them maybe know with a timer how much time they have left on the computer. There could be a reinforcer waiting for them once they get to the desired place. So if they're having to move from something highly preferred like computer to non-preferred work, then maybe there's a reinforcer when they get to the work table, something like that. Social story on lining up. The other thing I thought of while you're typing, I'm going to chime in since time is short. The other thing I thought of for that middle school student is to carefully look, since you are in that transition going from a highly preferred which is the computer, to work, then what kind of work do they prefer? Or is there a sort of a neutral kind of work that you could put in between there? That would be an easier, smoother transition. So maybe you would transition them to some easy work from the computer, something you know that is easy for them to do. Let them do that and transition then into the less preferred, harder work. Peer video modeling, right? We could show a peer video model to the preschooler of how we go from point A to point B. And we might even have a peer buddy for that preschooler that transitions with them. The other thing I thought about for the preschooler is they might have a transition object or a picture that they take with them to the place they're going so that it helps them stay on track, and a spot where they deposit that in the new location. And again, sometimes if a reinforcer is waiting for them where they're having to go, it makes it much more motivating for them to get there. Thanks, guys. You can keep typing, but I'm going to go forward a little bit. Okay, so this form is in your packet. And then finally, just a couple of things for you on annual transitions. I think we all know what it's like to get a student and to find out things like it's like on-the-job training, and there are things we find out that we wish we'd have known ahead of time. And we do have IEPs, but sometimes it's easy to have something more concise and at a glance. And so think about one-page profiles. This one is just for you to see, but I have put the template for it and a couple of others in your handouts. And I've also put a handout in there that's just general tips for creating one-page profiles. You want it to have a picture of the individual. You want it to talk about what their qualities are, what they're good at, who they are as a person. It needs to be very positive. You want to think about putting in there what's important to them. So it could be things they like to do, things they like I like people who following rules. If they have pets, certain possessions, if there are certain rituals that they like to do, or they like things to be the same all the time. That's still part of what's important to them and would be a good heads up for the receiving teacher. Also, possible reinforcers. And then how to support me, ideas. There's where you would put some of the things that you have done for transitions, some of the visual supports, and other things you've done to support the student during the course of their school day. And this one has, it's always in the first person. This one has something about the student's mother. And then the sending teacher has also written something about the student. So there are lots of these templates online that you can look at, and I would really encourage you to consider doing that for the students that are leaving you and going forward. And then lastly, do we have time to show? I don't think we have time to show this video, but it's a neat teacher who used the All About Me. And what she did was, at the first part of school, she took them and she put them all on the wall. She was the receiving teacher. The sending teacher had done them for her. She posted them all over the classroom, and the kids could find theirs when they arrived in the classroom. And she said they really enjoyed seeing themselves up on the wall. So that's another nice way to use it. And then finally, I have included an annual transition form. This is just a more sophisticated way to send information to the receiving teacher of your students. And it has the different areas on it and places you can make notes for them on things you are doing and have done that are effective with your students. So again, they get a lot of good information at the get-go and are ready to support the students at the very beginning of school. It's a very kind thing to do for your students and the receiving teachers. And I'll, in closing, just encourage you to utilize our website. We have video exemplars of things that we talk to you about when we present and do webinars. We have strategy guides to help you implement the strategies that we're talking about. We have modules, briefs, all kinds of things that will help you to implement evidence-based strategies for your students with ASD and related disabilities. So please use it. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions, I will stay online and answer those as best I can, or you can email any of us at Lazard. And thanks so much for joining us today, and good luck, and call us if you have questions. Oh, while you're writing questions, we'll go back and try to see if we can put that All About Me on, since we're staying. So.
Students in all grades at the end of the school year are given a little All About Me sheet just for them to write things about themselves, like who their friends are, what their favorite food, favorite color is, something personal about them, so that when we get to meet our new students at the end of the year, after all students have been sorted into what homerooms they're going to be in and rosters are finalized, we're able to get these, read a little bit about those students, and find out really who they are as a person, as opposed to who they are just on paper with just their grades and things like that. And what I actually did was I took these papers and hung them on the ceilings so that in open house at the very beginning of the school year, as students walked in to meet me for the first time, they were really excited to see their papers that were filled out from last year, and they were looking at it saying, oh my goodness, you know, I did that. That's something that's a piece of me within this classroom. And they were all really excited to know that I knew something about them other than just their grades.
Okay, great ending. Thanks again, guys.